Hello, I'm Melissa Wolff. I wear a few hats. I'm an actor, producer, administrator, and I have a parallel career in tech and product management. As many artists do, we wear multiple hats. I'm thrilled to be hosting today's fireside chat with a fellow Yalie and Brooklynite, my friend, Eleanor Burgess. Eleanor is a wonderful human being, and she is a self-described script monger for stage and screen. She's an earnest, extroverted, over-intellectualizing neurotic. Her words, not mine. I think we will get along wonderfully. She writes funny stories about tragic topics. Eleanor's work has been developed and produced at some of the most respected theaters across the United States and internationally. Her plays include The Niceties, Wife of a Salesman, Galilee 34, Chill, Start Down, and Mocha. Eleanor also writes for film and TV, including Perry Mason on HBO, We Crashed on Apple TV, and Interview with a Vampire on AMC. So let's get started. I'm so happy to actually see you on Zoom. I know we have seen each other at some Yale alumni events over the years. Why don't we get started talking about The Niceties, which is a huge, groundbreaking achievement. I'm sure many Yalies have seen it or at least heard about it, but why don't you tell us a little bit about it and your journey?
Yeah, I hope that Yalies who didn't have a chance to see it live will check out. There's still pretty regularly some virtual productions, and then the script's also available. Because I think they might find it relevant. The Niceties is a story about an encounter between a white history professor at an elite, slightly Gothic university in Connecticut, who's to say which one, and a Black female history student speaking about a paper about American history, a paper about the Revolutionary War, and all the dangerous and difficult places that conversation goes. And I think that it was a really exciting play to write for me, and a really scary play to write for me. I've studied history at Yale, and I loved it. I had a wonderful time. And I then also, I was a high school history teacher coming out of Yale. It took me a while to go into writing. And so a huge central part of my identity was like understanding the past and thinking that I understood the past. And for me, around 2015, 2016, I started to have a lot of questions about what narratives I had been taught, what narratives I had taught to others, what was left out, and how difficult it is to get at the truth. And questions that I think we're all wrestling with sort of as a group society, also like, but if there isn't a truth, that's terrifying. But if there is a truth, what truths have been left out to get to that truth? So it was it was an extremely personal play for me, because it was very much about this huge part of my identity as a historian, and as someone who believes that there is such a thing as knowledge and that knowledge is good. But I think part of the space that a lot of us are exploring right now is what is missing from the body of established knowledge, and how do you bring in multiple perspectives and still believe that it's great if people agree on an objective truth. It's a difficult area to navigate.
And is it still being streamed? I know that it had a huge life in the theater all across the country. I saw a production of it up in the Berkshires, actually. But I think you were streaming it. Is that still happening?
It was, and for educators, I think, so we recorded our original New York cast, who are incredibly terrific, Jordan Boatman and the late Lisa Baines. recorded version that might still be available for educators. It's not sort of widely available. But also, I know that there's a lot of theaters around the country that have been doing Zoom productions and some local productions, and that's still ongoing. So I think there should still be places to see. I don't know them all quite as well as I did
Right.
when I was actively involved in the productions, but there should still be chances to see it live and or virtually. And then also the script is available from Concord Theatricals, and I think it makes a good
Amazing.
read.
And did it change significantly from page to stage, or was it pretty consistent?
It changed enormously, but I'd like to think it just became more itself. You know, theater is this, as you know, fantastically collaborative medium, and you have this incredible luxury of getting to hear actors just own these roles and do the work, and then you realize, like, oh, I haven't gotten this point across yet, or oh, I'm making the point too much. They can get it across with a gesture, you know. So we had this long life from some initial workshops and developmental productions at CATF in West Virginia and Portland Stage in Maine, leading up to sort of a triple world premiere at Huntington Theater Company in Boston, Manhattan Theater Company in New York, and McCarter Theater Center in Princeton, New Jersey. So I had a chance to be actively involved in 5 productions, which is for a playwright like this massive luxury. It's really rare to get to do that, and to get to do that in pretty rapid. Like, that was all kind of within about a year and a half. And I kept working and I kept working. It mattered so much to me to get it just right, and to get the balance between those 2 characters just right, to let them both be heard. And to really make sure it was connecting. And of course, the world was changing too. I wrote the first draft in the fall of 2015, before, you know,
Seems like a lifetime ago.
Presidential election. And I kept the play set in the spring of 2016 because I didn't want to pretend to have known things that I hadn't known. I wanted to be true to what I was writing, but I couldn't pretend that the audience didn't know things. So I also had to keep writing to sort of adjust to what the audience was bringing in. And it's been really interesting, of course, in the last year and a half since the murder of George Floyd, to see the audience bring in a new sort of layer of their own thoughts and feelings to the play. So yeah, I tried to work my butt off to be like worthy of, you know, you're asking people for 2 straight hours of uninterrupted time, and you're asking dense actors to throw themselves into this like emotional crucible. So I tried to work hard enough to like not be, to be worthy of how much they were putting in.
Well, I think you succeeded. So all your hard work, check. Let's talk about other work since the Niceties, since that sort of seemed to be a jumping off point in many ways from my vantage point, which is wonderful to see. So what are you working on now?
Well, I'm super thrilled, you know, after, as you know, COVID was continues to be, but was a particularly tough year and a half for the performing arts, and for theater workers. I'm so thrilled and grateful to have my first new premiere production of a new play going up this March at Writers Theater in Chicago. I'm doing a play called Wife of a Salesman. And as the title indicates, it's loosely inspired by Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. It's a play where a housewife from Brooklyn drives up to Boston to confront her husband's mistress. At some point in America's mythic past is what the stage direction describes the timing as, but you can picture it as roughly 1950 in your head. It's an unpacking of gender in the American dream, where women are supposed to fit in the American dream, what the American dream is supposed to be for women, what it was then, how much it has changed or hasn't changed. and where that fits in American storytelling too. You know, the American dream and American storytelling are so intertwined, and what stories we've heard about who we're supposed to be and the roles we're supposed to perform, and how those roles shape our lives and box us in and also inspire us. And yeah, so, you know, I like the light topics. I like the
I was going to say, just a little light topic for Sunday afternoon, you know.
On from race in American history
Yeah.
to gender in American history, just a little.
So have you heard any responses, or, you know, from folks like from Arthur Miller to, you know,
I actually
people, like, because it feels like you're in conversation with, you know, the American canon.
I actually have some exciting. I just came back on Friday, 4 days ago, from a workshop in Chicago with the cast who's going to be doing the production, which is, again, like this huge luxury to get to work early with your cast. And it was really exciting. I think that, especially coming out of COVID, I think the question of like who we're supposed to be for both men and women is very alive and present. And, you know, Miller was, I kind of went into it thinking that I was going to be like hit piece on Arthur Miller, like, why did he flesh out the female characters more? And then I like reread his play and was like, oh, he's a genius. You know, this is a really brilliant, savage deconstruction of like work and the American psyche. Oh, shoot, he's smart. But I think that question of, are we supposed to be good workers? Are we supposed to be good wives? Are we supposed to be good mothers? If we're not supposed to be good wives, like if we're free from that, then does that mean now we're supposed to be good workers, just like men? Is that freedom? Like, is that liberation? Or are they all just kind of things we're told to be that aren't really true to us? So it was really exciting to be working with the cast. I think people were excited about it. And I'm doing a podcast interview soon with some members of the Arthur Miller Society.
Okay,
so
that's
I'm excited to talk to them. I haven't heard what they think yet. But
that's going to be amazing. And I'm assuming there's issues of power and economy, economics and financial status. I can only imagine that's sprinkled in there.
Yeah, and I would, you know, I'm sure there will be some people who will say I missed the point of Arthur Miller in the same way that with the Niceties, there were a few people who said I like missed the point of American history, which I don't think I did. There's always people, you're always going to get a bell curve of reactions, but I also think that for me, I came into it with a lot of respect for the original, and I'm not trying to either take down the original or replace the original. I'm trying to build up this sort of other space of, you know, thinking a lot about like my grandmothers and like where's their great American play, right? Like we have so many great American plays for men, from Fences to Death of a Salesman to, you know, Long Day's Journey into Night, so many, to Streetcar Named Desire and Glass Menagerie. And there's just a lot. There's a lot of really good plays for men about the 1950s. And I was trying to just figure
yes, there
out,
are.
There's so many. And I was trying to just figure out, you know, where is my grandmother's play and how do I relate to what she was told and what her possibilities were. So I hope, you know, it's done with
that your grandmother was a figure and a character unwittingly in the play, maybe.
Well, my grandmother lived in Brooklyn and was married to a salesman. So the play is very personal for me. My grandmother was married to a salesman in the 1950s. So I came into it with a lot of personal connections, which always helps. It's, you know, you always have to write something that's personal.
Right. Well, actually, that's sort of an interesting segue to another sort of topic I was going to ask you about. So you referenced that you studied history, you were a history student and maybe a lifelong student of history. You studied history at Yale, you taught history. And the thread I see in your work is you sort of take these big, complex ideas, whether it's history or gender, race, power, economic injustice, and I see it in your work on stage, and I see it just even in like your Twitter feed, your work as an activist. So my question is, how do you take these kind of like larger than life, massive issues and hone in and turn these big ideas into very specific, funny, dramatic stories?
I mean, I do think that it is exactly the right segue. I think things have to be personal, and I think that sort of interplay between, and one of the things that I always loved about history was the interplay between like massive world historical forces that we can't control or shape or even see clearly when we're caught up in them, and the individual, the individual person with their individual dreams and their individual baggage and their individual like really annoying traits, and their sibling rivalries and their mediocre marriages and the way that those things interact so in such a two-directional way, where the individual psychology of one person can change the world, and of course the world changes each of us in our individual psychologies. And so I think that trying to have a theme that I'm obsessed with, but then also have a character, or ideally two or three, at least two, as in the Niceties, who I love the characters, I love the people. And I do think that, for writers, probably especially for playwrights and screenwriters, because it's such a verbal medium, it's like having imaginary best friends, except like instead of best friends, they're like toxic messes, but you love them as if they were best friends. They feel so real, and their issues are, you care about them so much, and I'm trying to hold tight to that, and to, this is this person's journey through this topic. Of course, there's that saying that universality lies in specificity, that if you want to talk about something that everyone can relate to, you actually should talk about one extremely specific person and not try to have them represent everybody, and let them be themselves. And I think that's where, the luxury of a collaborative medium like theater, where actors pick up that mantle and get inside the character and tell you what they don't know yet and what they need to know to understand their character, and where the character is feeling real and alive and like a person they can inhabit, and where the character is feeling like a mouthpiece for a political speech. They're your partners in that endeavor. And so I think that, I would hope that when someone leaves one of my plays, they're talking about the themes. I would also hope they're talking about the characters, and just like, that person drove me nuts, or I loved that person, or that person is me, or that person drove me nuts, but they're me, any of those responses.
All of the above. There was definitely a lot of chatter when I left the theater.
Yeah, the Niceties, I've been told every single sentence under the sun about those characters, and it makes me really happy, because it means that people are having a reaction, that they're having a deep emotional reaction to the people in front of them.
100%. So talking about collaborations, can you share maybe an early collaboration with maybe an actor or a director or another writer, someone that really impacted you for that particular project, or perhaps years on?
Definitely. I think for me, a big turning point in just understanding how to collaborate came from a wonderful partnership with Megan Sandberg-Zakian, who's a brilliant theater director. And she and I worked, the first time we worked together was on Chill at Merrimack Rep in Massachusetts, at Lowell, Massachusetts. And that was, I think, about a year out of graduate school for me. So I was still really learning, what is this job? In graduate school, you kind of learn like, oh, you write scripts. And then when you get out of graduate school, you realize that the job is actually to get the script to becoming a performed piece, and to work with 20 or 50 other people to get it there. And that's its own part of the job. And Megan, in addition to being a great artist, is this really thoughtful collaborator who knows how to listen and wants to, she doesn't want to win a conversation. She wants, to draw out what's under, if somebody in a conversation, whether it's an actor or the writer or the playwright or the theater is, having kind of doubts or worries, the goal isn't to make the doubts or worries to go away. The goal is to figure out, why are they having those doubts and worries? Is there maybe something that we are missing that we haven't addressed that we should address? Or are they having those doubts and worries because they're going to a terrific, scary place and they should feel scared because it's terrifying to perform live and it's terrifying to put up a controversial play? And, And I think that working with her taught me to just speak up and be honest about and you know, that when you're working with people, you should be able to be honest, and then the answer might be, we're not worried about that and here's why, but it's good that you spoke up. And the answer might be like, oh gosh, that's a great point, you know. So I think a lot of the sort of journey of getting better at this profession for me has been just being much more honest, much more rigorously honest. I think it's where good art comes from, and I think it's where good collaboration comes from. And I think working with someone who made space for that really helped me grow as both an artist and a collaborator.
I'm a big fan of Megan's as well.
She's the best.
She's terrific. She's really wonderful. Speaking of speaking up, something I noticed sort of in preparation for our little chat today was your remarkable transparency and honesty and sort of willingness to speak your mind, at least on social media and some other articles I read. And so I have a question for you. And I mean that in terms of not only for yourself, but for other writers, to make sure that writers are compensated for their time and that justice is, you know, infiltrates sort of all parts of your life. So it seems, which I admired greatly. So one of my questions for you is, was there a specific incident where you had to fight for something that you wanted, something that was tough, did you get it? Did you relent? And what was the outcome?
Well, then thank you for saying that. I hope that I'm, you know, honest and active and speaking on behalf of things that matter. I'm very aware of the areas where I don't speak up enough, and I'm certainly not perfect about that at all. But I do try. I think that I was lucky to have encountered, I think because of people who have gone before me, by the time I learned to speak up, I was working mostly with people who responded really well to that. It was really clear working on the Niceties that it was so important to get it right in terms of the balance, in terms of who's in the audience, in terms of how you present and frame the play. And I had to speak up. And I think it's often easier to speak up, not for yourself, but for the work, for, you know, I know the audience needs this. I know the actors need this. You know, I know that this is the right thing to do, and it's not about me. It's about creating a theater culture where, you know, other people are paid enough and other people are taken care of. And I think that working on something where it just was really clear that you had to take care of your audience, you had to take care of your collaborators, that helped me learn to speak my mind. But then I was really lucky to not have to do it in a very confrontational way. I think that I worked with the theaters that I happened to work with, or at least in my encounters with them, were very receptive to wanting to get it right. So, and I think that that's just owed to a lot of people who came before me and spoke up in much harder circumstances. So
It's good to hear.
Yeah, I don't have one particular story, but I do think it's an ongoing journey of, for women in the professional world, for probably anyone in the professional world, kind of learning to be more honest about where your instincts are telling you, hey, there's a right thing to do here. And once you realize that, you have no choice but to do it.
I agree. So just a few closing questions. Was there a class or professor at Yale that has had a lasting impact on you?
So many. I mean, clearly, you know, I've talked about my sort of abiding love of history, and I had this wonderful opportunity to do really deep research through the history major. I had grants that let me do basically a year and a half of travel and research for my senior thesis, which is,
Wow.
and I turned in a 120-page senior thesis. So thank you, history department, for letting me do that. And that was a huge shaping, but it was the first project I had real ownership over. And a really deep, control over, and it was what I believed it had to be. And it was the first time I had enough time to kind of do the quality of work that I like to do.
What was the paper about? What was the thesis?
But I also love, speaking for liberal arts education, I took a lot of religion classes that really meant a lot to me too, that were outside of my major. I took philosophy of religion and theological aesthetics with John Hare. Theological aesthetics was up at the Div School, and I got to take it with a bunch of divinity students. And I loved the talking about sort of the intersection of transcendence, aesthetics, religion, and art was wonderful. We don't get enough time in the post-collegiate years to think about the really, really big, giant aspirational possibilities. And so that class is a very fond memory for me, and the opportunity to spend 6 months thinking really rigorously about something that wasn't directly applicable to what I did. I treasure.
That's awesome.
Memory.
And what advice would you give to aspiring and maybe seasoned writers?
Gosh, I think honesty. I think that, for me, at least, the work that I've been, honesty and obsession, like the work that I've been most feeling able to stand by, has come out of a really genuine, like a personal obsession. You can't do anything because you think someone else will like it. That doesn't work. There's always, like, I personally, I thought the Niceties was the play that I was going to hide in a drawer forever. And as you mentioned, it ended up being the play that, went to a lot of places and has opened a lot of doors for me. But it was personal. It was for me. And I think that your obsession is kind of your gift to the world, because whatever you're obsessed with, you're going to think about so much harder than everyone else is thinking about it. And you're going to care so much more than everyone else cares. And you're going to be honest about it, because for once, the topic matters more to you than your own reputation or your own ambition. It's the topic. And so I think that following your obsession is where you have something to add that other people aren't going to have gone quite as far down that rabbit hole and brought it to the world. So
that's beautiful.
Get obsessed, stay obsessed.
Stay obsessed. I'm going to take that one with me. Definitely. Well, thank you, Eleanor, so much. It was so great to reconnect with you. Hopefully I'll see you back in Brooklyn. We could actually do things maybe with distance, and we'll put our jackets on. But I highly recommend following Eleanor on Twitter for these life lessons and others, which I took to heart. And then, of course, going to see her work on stage and screen, and be prepared to be challenged with Eleanor's obsessions.
Thanks so much for chatting and for the amazing questions. I appreciate it.
Awesome.